Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is not the formal start. We're going to give everybody a couple of minutes to arrive, but I'm really grateful that you took time out today to join us for this fascinating conversation. So, yeah, thank you. Let's give everybody just one more minute or so to arrive, and then we'll get going right away. AJ, how are you? Very nice to see you. Thank you for making time, Lorato. Seeing some good friends popping in. So thank you for taking time out of your lunch to spend with us. Feel free to eat. Yeah, we'll just give everybody another few moments. I'm seeing some names I know. Thank you. All right, I think let's get going and others can join as they come. But yeah, as I said, thank you so much for taking time out to join us today. My name is Glenn Gillis. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sea Monster. We're an impact gaming company that does a lot of work in the financial education space. I'm also the chairperson of Games for Change Africa, which is the African chapter of a global organization that looks at how games can be used for good in the world. And a lot of the work that we do is really thinking about financial inclusion. But you're not here to hear from me. You're really privileged to be joined today by John Manyike. And John, thank you so much for making time. You know, I'm a fan of yours and the way that you think about this. And you've been thinking about financial education probably longer than anybody else that I know. Your day job is head of consumer financial education at Old Mutual. You've worked across multiple countries in Africa. You've got a background in industrial psychology, which is always so important when we think about people's relationships with money. And of course, you're also a trustee of the CISA Foundation. And I know you do a lot of great work there driving financial education. So just before we get into the conversation, a couple of things. You might want to put yourself on gallery view for the people in the audience. That'll put us to full screen. And then also use the Q&A function, please. So feel free as questions come up, just drop them into the chat and we'll be monitoring there. Sorry, drop them into the Q&A function. Doesn't matter if you drop them into the chat, we'll look there too, but Q&A is good for this. And so the idea is that John and I are going to have a chat for about 40 minutes or so, and then we're going to leave 15 or so minutes for questions and answers, etc. So yeah, as conversations start coming up, then feel free to have the conversation. So John, so it's the data that we see says that only 51% of South African adults are financially literate. What does that actually mean? Like, what does financial literacy actually mean? And what does this 51% mean to you?
I think essentially it means only nearly half of South Africans are financially literate, which means these are people who can make informed financial decisions. But I think to some extent, I mean, awareness is not enough, by the way, Glenn. Awareness is not enough. So you can be financially literate and still decide to do otherwise. You can be aware. Let me use a slightly different example. You can be aware of the need to eat good food, to eat healthy, consume healthy food. You can even know what sort of food you need to be eating, nutrition and all that, but it doesn't mean you will do it. So sometimes we can appreciate the fact that, I mean, it's a good, well, whether it's a good number or not, but I mean, considering that we're not the only country with low levels of financial literacy, even in Europe, I mean, you'd be amazed that regardless of access to information, there are still low levels of financial literacy globally. But again, awareness is just a step towards doing the right thing. You can be aware that you need to go to the gym to stay fit, stay healthy, but it doesn't mean you're going to do it. I mean, how many people go to religious institutions are here, the teachings there, but do they apply? You can have somebody walk out of a religious institution and swear the hell out of you.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I mean, if we were to just simply look at financial literacy and all that, I think for me the biggest question is, how do you motivate people to do the right thing? And to motivate people, it means that people need to get into the habit of doing something. And once you get to the habit of doing something, it's about repeating this habit until it becomes a permanent behavior that you can actually do it with ease. If you don't drive your car at land for 6 months or even a year, I bet if I give you car keys, you'll be able to know how to drive because it's part of you. Same with a bicycle. You know how to ride a bicycle, you don't ride it for 5 years. If I give you a bicycle, you'll be able to, because you've practiced it for so long enough to be able to repeat it. I think same with financial literacy. It has to be a permanent habit, something that you practice, that you can actually do it with your eyes closed for us to benefit from it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, you know, and we always say there's a definition of learning, and that it doesn't matter what you know, it's what you do that matters, and that's quite a modern definition. Go ahead.
Yeah, I like that because, you know, so when we talk about gamification, and you look at yes, I mean, anything that you overdo, of course, will be a problem. I see with my son, if I leave him on a PlayStation at night and I go to bed, I can wake up at 2 a.m. and find him playing. But if it's well controlled, and you are practicing something, I mean, depending on whatever the game is about, it actually creates an opportunity to practice a habit, good or bad.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that's the link I see there.
And I also love what you're hinting at here, because, you know, we use this bucket phrase, sort of financial education. And I think, you know, it's a whole continuum of things. You know, there's a mathematical literacy challenge. And we know the extremely poor results that, you know, our education system has delivered in terms of maths literacy. So if you're not mathematically literate, you're already, you know, one step behind. How do you read a statement? How do you look at an investment summary and make an informed decision? So at its base level, we've got those kinds of challenges. Then, as you say, just becoming aware of good practice is another whole set of issues. And then the real piece that you're talking about is this habit formation, this power that you, as you allude to, games and gamification are very good at it. And we can use that dark art for good. Because how else? You know, it's not going to be an advert or something. Hey, how do you kind of get that message across? And I wonder if that doesn't bring across this massive paradox that I always experience in the South African financial institution. You know, we've got some of the most sophisticated banks and insurance companies in the world. I mean, that's just not my opinion. You know, we see what's happening in the loyalty space with things like Vitality. We see the Moneyversity program that you know, Old Mutual has pioneered. We see eBucks, we see these things and we think, oh, those things are great. But what we don't realize is that they're actually best in class in the world. And so you've got this paradox between this massive sophistication in our financial institutions and then this low financial capability, I guess, is in a way a better word, you know. And what does that mean for customer relationships? And what does that mean for sustainable businesses? Because we're going to run out of customers if the data is to be believed.
No, look, that's an interesting question and observation there. And I like where you started from when you were talking about the relationship between mathematics and financial literacy and financial savviness. I remember a couple of years ago, I think 2013, we did a longitudinal study in partnership with the World Bank and the ILO. And one of the interesting observations made then was the direct correlation between basic mathematical understanding and financial literacy. Yeah, you have to know how to add, how to multiply, because how else are you going to appreciate the power of compound interest without those basic mathematics. You see it even now when people are going and doing shopping. You get to a retail store and they're showing you a product and they're saying 500 gram of this product is worth, say for argument's sake, 100 rand.
Yeah.
But then they show you a 1 kg that is worth, let's say the other one is 100 rand, but they show you a 1 kg that is, say, 800 rand.
Yeah.
Rather, let me say 80 rand. Let me say 80 rand because I use 100
yeah,
rand.
yeah.
So if you understand mathematics, you know that if you take 2 boxes, 500 grams,
yeah,
and if you buy 2 of them, you're actually paying more. Sometimes it may be vice versa. So you need to understand what makes up 1 kg. If they show you a price there, what is the unit cost for what they've put there? Because just because you see a rand value, you need to understand what is this rand value all about? What is the unit cost? So I think if our foundation of mathematics is not right, we are going to struggle with financial literacy even later in life. It will influence the kind of customers that we have. But also a lot of things depend on understanding those basics. So, if you want to, if we want as a country good customers, regardless of the industry, there must be some degree of literacy. Let me say literacy in general. And then there must be a fair understanding of basic mathematics, so that we're able to do that. I mean, I remember years ago, I used to have a domestic helper. She was not literate. But unfortunately, I realized, hey, she's actually a danger to my child at the time, because if my child is sick and I left at home and I said, if this child, because the child is there, I would say, look, you need to give this child this medicine. This is the dosage you need to give to the child. And this is the medication you need to give her. If that domestic helper is not able to follow that and cannot read, okay, this is the dosage, or cannot recall, there's danger there. She's a danger to herself. She's a danger to other people around her. As much as the domestic work is as basic as you can imagine, but there's certain things that must be in place. And I think for me, that's a rule of thumb in any economy.
Yeah, and the two things that sort of jump out to me is this, and one of them is around this cashless society that, we all know the benefits and we benefit from those lower transaction costs, etc. But how many times have you done research or been out talking to people and, they get their money, they take it, they turn it into cash, and then they go into, ShopRite or wherever it might be, Boxer, and it's almost like the only way that they can really think about their money is to physically see it in front of them, and then they say, okay, so this 200 rand is for this 200 rand is for that, this 100 rand is for that. So they physically have to kind of see it, and that creates an enormous cost to the industry, but also to the consumer. And you can do whatever you like, but how do you start to solve that? So I guess my second point to that is, so what's the responsibility of business in this conversation versus, we should say, but it's not, what's the old mutual got to do with solving the math challenge? It's not our problem. We pay our taxes. We expect government to deliver that. We know that they're failing, unfortunately. So where does financial literacy and just general education begin and end in a company? And how do you validate what you're doing to board when they say, very nice, but is that our problem to solve?
I would say partly yes and partly no. One cannot say, well, it's not my problem to solve, because then you're still going to be stuck with a problem anyway. And I think when we talk financial education and financial literacy, we need to take a holistic view, and more especially a long-term view. What do I mean by long-term view? Look, if anything at all, if anything, if we had to consider these things that we need to do for the long-term benefit of society and the economy, we need to go back and say, if we were to start financial education, where should it start? I would say it should start at school. So, so you need some level of partnership between the private sector, financial services in particular, and banks, and actually partner with the Department of Basic Education, make sure that right in the early childhood development phase, that there's some level of financial literacy there. I believe that's where we need to invest so that we grow with this thing. There's a way that we can integrate financial literacy in some of the subjects, not only in terms of maths lit, but anything that we do, we need to find a way to integrate financial literacy there, so that as they grow up through the system, they are they're well informed in terms of the financial literacy. It's not something that the problem is that if you're going to start introducing financial literacy at the very late stage, it might be too late, because you're competing with other things that they've learned over the years. And to unlearn certain things can become a mission impossible in some instances. So I think that's where we need to start. Look, I know there's some work happening there in different phases. I'm not sure it's as coordinated as it could be, to the extent that we can actually see the results that we are looking for. But I believe that's where we need to start, and then let people grow with this thing. Bear in mind that in some families, given the cultural background and how people are socialized, money talk is a taboo. And people are not comfortable enough to talk about money in their homes and things like that. And if you're only going to start engaging with money when you start working, you're going to have a problem. And that problem has been there for many years, where people have a bank account and they withdraw the money on the very first day when the money hits the bank account. They withdraw all the money and they're using cash. And where it's safer for the money to be in the bank account, as opposed to withdrawing the money, keeping the money at home. A lot can happen with the money at home, but it makes saving very difficult, because money in your hands or money under the bed or under the couch does not earn interest, so we need to decide what are the things what are the good habits that we want to learn and which ones we shouldn't. So there's a lot of work there.
There is, and I laugh at your reference about our president who's might be
me. I didn't mention the president. It's you. Glenn. I didn't say that.
I'm just saying. I just had an image of money in a couch somewhere. So sorry, you're right. That one's fully on me. But you're right. So we need a systematic, strategic, long-term view. We need a partnership between corporate South Africa, the government. I love what you said earlier, and that is, the problem's just not going to go away. It's not going to solve itself. And okay, so that's one side of it, and that's clear, critical, I would say, at crisis levels. Because if we just fast forward those demographic changes that you talk about, we know we're going to start running out of customers. I mean, low savings rates means that your market, your total addressable market is essentially shrinking over time, and as we're seeing the demographic shifts in that. So that brings us back to saying, okay, we're starting to find a way to build the business case. But, even in the long-term insurance industry, the clue's in the name, you are the guys who we trust to look decades into the future, to curate our money, to help us create value, etc. You've got your quarterly KPIs, everyone's driven by these short-term targets. And so how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile this long game, which everybody I think would agree is critical, versus like, how do I make this make sense to my business in the short term?
Yeah. So first and foremost, you need a patient capital. If you don't have patient capital, you won't go anywhere. I think some of the challenges that banks and financial institutions struggle with is when they have to invest in financial education, there tends to be this pressure to see the commercial outcomes of a financial education initiative. Yes, on the one hand, you want to do consumer financial education with an end in mind that puts the customer at the center of what you are doing. And you want to make sure that you educate the customer. You help put the customer in a position where they can make informed financial decisions. But then there's other there are other interests that business would have to say, yeah, fine, once we've done that, but when are we going to start speaking to the customer about products? Now, sometimes that pressure can be unhealthy for the customer. So you want to prioritize the interests of the customer with a view that if you do a good job, this customer would, at some point, would like to speak to you. But you first need to invest in these programs and put the information, the knowledge, and provide the tools to the customer to make their own decisions at their own time. Now, so when I talk about patient capital, is that when you do this thing, you need to have that long-term view in mind to say, we are actually investing in tomorrow's market. For example, if you are investing in some kind of a collaboration and partnership with Department of Basic Education targeting at learners at school, you know 10, 15, 20 years down the line, they will become your future customers. But these are informed customers. You also need to appreciate the fact that the financial systems, the financial products have become very sophisticated. And in order to simplify them, you also need to raise the level of understanding and awareness of the customers that you are targeting, so that when they are provided with the relevant information and tools, they can make that informed financial decision. But without the patient capital, you cannot achieve that. You're going to end up having something that looks like financial education, but it's actually marketing disguised as a financial education. And this is the reason why the regulator, the FSCA, is now introducing these conduct standards on financial education. They want to clamp down on this marketing that is thrown to customers, but it's really about selling. And I think they would have their reasons why they want to protect the interests of the customer, because an unsuspecting customer might end up taking a product thinking they were being educated, but in fact, it was more like just trying to get a sale. So the customer has to be protected,
I definitely want to come back to that FSCA because I know you're absolutely intimate with that. But I just want to double click on something that you've said there too, because it's the problem again doesn't go away. Just to say your phrase back to you again, I could sell you an insurance product, but your lapse rate 2-3 years, I'm just going to kick the can down. It's not affordable. I can go through all the affordability tests, all the stuff that the regulators told us to do. And I mean, even sorry to say this, but sometimes I'm just like, close my eyes. I don't know the answers to the questions that they're asking. And again, that's because, as you rightly pointed out, this has got to do with me and my relationship with money and how I see value in the world. And that's true for everybody. But, ultimately, we're just kicking the can down the road. It's not a healthy book. That cost is going to come back. And what we've seen in South Africa is the rise of simple business models that are starting to really get traction. And, I won't mention the ones, maybe I will, but, in the insurance space, I think about what Naked and Pineapple are doing. It's super clear. It seems to be simple. It's whatever, Capitec, others, Old Mutual's new bank, I think, is going to follow very similar sort of principles. But then you're also seeing the rise, back to your earlier example, of the rise of something like Boxer, and seeing the power that Boxer is delivering and the growth that they're delivering. Why? Because it's super simple to understand their pricing. The value proposition is clear, and it's almost the antidote. So the sophisticated businesses need to hide that sophistication to make it simple for customers, while at the same time we've got to invest to make customers better informed, better educated, etc. Does that sound about right to you?
No, absolutely. Look, simplicity is key. Let's be honest. Here we're dealing with markets who generally struggle, as I said earlier, with literacy. Yes, that has changed tremendously. But even academic qualification, it does not, most of it does not include financial literacy. You can have somebody with a PhD in whatever field, but I can assure you that in whatever all the courses and they've done in all the semesters and whatever, whether it's a undergraduate, postgraduate, master's, or doctorate, that there's no intentionality around putting financial literacy there, because the assumption is that you should have learned it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that a CA who is a CFO in a big institution, that they are good at managing their own finances. So I think there's a lot that still needs to happen in terms of avoiding to make assumptions, because we've learned also over time that there's absolutely no relationship between what people earn and the ability to manage their finances. These two are not mutually exclusive. So we need to recognize that. But even then, when you offer something or a financial education intervention or initiative of some sort, but you also need to engage with people at their level. And they think differently, they reason differently, they may have different needs, and so on. That's why simplicity is so critical, and not making assumptions. Because very often we put people in boxes and we make assumptions, and we believe that they will learn, and when in fact simplicity could have solved it.
Absolutely. And yeah, just two quick things before we move on from this. But I think this point that you're making about what we think people need to know in terms of financial literacy, and you talk about compound interest and all of these critical things that we know are the basis of real wealth creation. But actually what you're really talking about is delayed gratification. You're talking about this ability to defer my short-term gratification for long-term gain. It becomes that personal thing. And so we must be careful that we don't do the surface level education around, as you rightly point out, what we think financial education is, because the science of it is really about understanding that person, our relationship with ourselves. I mean, this is as true as entrepreneurship, where we do a huge amount of work, and we know it's also one of these critical levers to unlocking the potential of this country. A lot of people talk to you about, no, you need a profit and a balance sheet, you need to cash flow, and yes, of course you need those things, but actually what you need is resilience. You need those personality traits which have been scientifically proven to validate, to correlate with a likelihood that you're going to survive. I mean, I read that stat just yesterday, that small business survey. Somebody said, some survey says that up to 50% of the small businesses in South Africa don't see themselves surviving in the next year. I mean, that is an apocalypse. We know how critical those businesses are. And sure, sometimes I worry that we move too slowly when these crises come. Sorry, I know it was a bit of a ramble, but yeah, pick up on any of those threads.
Yeah. No, look, true. I mean, and I'll pick up on the last one you spoke about entrepreneurs, but 50% of them don't see themselves succeeding. In fact, for the longest time, I learned that nearly half of SMEs, they actually collapse within 2 years. It's because I think there are various reasons why we see that. Whereas on the other hand, we know that globally, the biggest employers are not your blue chip companies, your big financial institutions, banks, and so on. It's the small to medium businesses. They are the biggest employers around the world. And if you want to drive the economy and you want to improve unemployment, it's about being intentional about helping small to medium businesses. So even if they hire 1 or 2 people, but there are many, because these are small to medium businesses.
Exactly.
Yes, we've got CCAS here and there, but I still feel that accessibility of information remains limited. There may be other great initiatives, but they are not necessarily out there or in the public domain in the manner that they should be. Even if they are there, there's no search engine optimization to assist people who are looking for information. If they were to Google it, that they will find that information easily. So I think there's a lot that needs to happen with regard to small to medium businesses, and most of them struggle with record keeping, and they don't know where to access funding. Even if they were to apply for funding, but their story is not together, they struggle with the basics of putting a business plan. And for you, I just we just recently did a podcast on small to medium business to say what are the things that funders would look at before they give you funding? What are the things that you need to work on, that you need to put in place to put yourself in a position where you could qualify for these business support programs or funding for your business? But look, we have a lot of work in many areas, Len, even with regard to the small to medium businesses.
Yeah, and okay, so we agree. So this needs to be deep. This needs to be properly researched and based on scientific principles, and then it needs to be broad, both with respect to young people, as you eloquently described, throughout their schooling, small businesses, if that's the fork in the road that people go down and start their own businesses. At corporates, I know you do an enormous amount of work for your partners who trust you with their pension funds, etc. And so you've seen a lot, you've tried a lot, you've seen what works. There's, in a way, not much that can substitute a brilliantly told story with a brilliant facilitator in your local language, face to face, as a coach being there. But how do you scale that? How do you make that measurable? How do we do this in a way that drives data into the decision-making process?
So, look, we know companies have their own research units, and unfortunately, data is not readily available because, of course, companies are trying to protect their their IP, because they don't want to lose their competitive advantage. But I just somehow wish there was a way people could actually access some of this research done to help people, whether it's businesses, whatever the case may be. Because some of the research that we find are very much European. Just because something worked in Switzerland doesn't mean it's gonna work here in a city somewhere, or maybe called Paris here in Free State. The realities are completely different. So I think we need to chart our own course and come up with our own solutions without just borrowing every model from overseas.
And I know that you attend quite a few international conferences. I think we spoke about that one that you went to in Amsterdam a couple of years ago. How does our financial education stack up against what other people are doing elsewhere?
I was quite stunned, by the way. What year was that? I attended one. The rest of the conference I attended were virtual, but the very first one that I attended in person was the one you're referring to in Amsterdam. And there were lots of people around the world who are attending this international. This is an OECD international conference on consumer financial education. When I look at what other countries in Europe were showcasing there, and I looked at what we're doing, I said, what? We are there. I think in some instances, we may be even ahead of the other developed countries in the world. I mean, when it comes to the digital financial education or even the face-to-face stuff, I mean, very, very, very powerful. I was quite humble and proud to be a South African, having attended that and seeing the extent to which we have progressed with digitizing financial education, the gamification around it. I don't think we should always, hold on to this. I don't believe we should hold on to this premise that says anything that's from Europe is superior to what we have here. No, there are certain things. Even just comparing South Africa and Kenya. Kenya may be ahead of South Africa in many other areas when it comes to this digital world and how they do these things. I mean, there's things that work well in the rest of the continent, in Africa, that actually don't work that well in South Africa. The market is different. So I believe that we need to customize solutions which speak to our economy, to our people, given our cultural nuances and so forth. But trust me, when it comes to consumer financial education and some of the fintech that we have, we've got some of the best products and solutions in this country that the world is yet to see.
That's been my experience too, and I appreciate you saying that. I think it's because it is a crisis. It is overwhelming. It can be like, geez, am I really going to stick my head above the parapet wall here and say I'm going to divert some of the marketing budget into this more patient, more systematic, more measured kind of approach? Because isn't it easier just to keep doing the thing that we know probably is not really working as effectively as it could, but at least, I'm not asking somebody to do anything different. And yet, we've got these pockets of excellence and these models that kind of work. And I think that brings me all the way around to, the power of M&E. And maybe I still find, it's such an incredible methodology. So monitoring and evaluation, maybe for the people listening in, is this incredibly robust framework that can be used to actually assess what it is that's working and what's not. And it comes from a lot of the nonprofit world, etc. It's not often a language which is familiar to businesses because they're measuring, short-term financial returns, etc., etc. But everyone's got their own M&E framework, and yet they, as you say, it's their secret sauce. They don't want to share this. You've got the regulator saying, on the other hand, hang on a second, you guys are all doing your own things, and you dressing this marketing thing up as financial education. Where do you see that going? And what is your view on that?
Look, I think we don't have a choice when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, because there is a best practice from a research or methodology point of view, if I may put it that way. There is best practice, and it is not necessarily owned by a single individual. We know that when it comes to monitoring and evaluation or research surveys, there are certain methodologies that are considered ethical, that are considered to be most appropriate and more effective. So everybody has to gravitate towards this best practice. And of course, there's been lots of studies around the world on the effectiveness of financial education. So monitoring and evaluation is unavoidable, and it has to be done, not because the regulator says you should do it, not because you've got a BBE code that has a guidance note which requires that you also do some level of monitoring and evaluation. So I just think that if we don't do this monitoring and evaluation, we will never know if our financial literacy is working or not. I am encouraged, though, that it seems the trends are that people are improving. There's an improvement in how people are dealing with their debts. And by the way, that we're seeing more, and this is one of the research findings from what we shared last week with the Old Mutual Savings and Investment Monitor, that we're seeing a trend where people are more proactive in engaging with their service providers, their banks and creditors, to make an arrangement, as opposed to sitting back and then they end up defaulting, and then they end up having judgment. So for me, that's an indication that there seems to be an improvement there. But we need to continue to measure this. And I want to try and link my answer to the question that was asked on the chat by Amanda Solomon, who was asking, how do you think digital literacy affects financial literacy in South Africa? I would say in a big way, because we found that even if you can have this fintech and the best financial education or digital platforms, if people are struggling with digital literacy in general, financial literacy will become a problem. And this is not, I'm not talking about people who are in rural communities. I'm talking about people who are learned. I mean, we ran a program, by the way, which we're doing with the Department of Basic Education. We went to a particular province. We said, before before this financial education program is offered to learners in school, because we looked at the prevalence of financial literacy in the current curriculum for the senior phase. And then we then started embedding consumer financial education around the curriculum, which the department gave a thumbs up. We then said, no, but the teacher was supposed to be deploying this thing. Cannot do it unless we start with them. So guess what?
Yeah.
We went to the teachers, we said, let's train you how to do this thing. There was some digital work that they needed to do in terms of doing stuff on a digital platform. They struggle. I'm talking about teachers. They struggle. So I think generally we do have a problem with digital literacy in general, and that can become a barrier to digital financial literacy if people are struggling with gadgets. You know, you look at the young ones now. I have a 13-year-old. One time I had a phone that I wasn't using for a while, which was a backup phone. I forgot the PIN. I gave it to him. Guess what? He opened it. How? I don't know. He's only 13, but he was able to open it without the PIN. So I just think that there's a generation, there's a generation of us, Glenn, that was born before technology, and they are struggling with digital literacy. So I think somehow we need to factor that in the kind of education that we're offering. Now you are finding big companies, including banks, financial institutions, who are trying to offer a customer service digitally, because they realize that this thing of bricks and mortar is expensive. It's not only for institutions, but even for the customers, because to travel to a branch cost money. Some of them may have to take 2 taxis to go there.
Exactly.
Now you want to offer digital solutions there, you have a problem, because if customers are not comfortable, they will still insist on coming to the office, which begs the question, shouldn't we be investing something as an industry in raising the level of digital literacy?
Yeah, it's something very close to our heart as well, because of course I think the benefits of being able to do this digitally, to deliver this, you know, I think something changes. So something changes, you know, when you're looking at your phone and you're getting the advice and you're learning and you're practicing, and that's again where a lot of these games I think can play a big role. But because the benefit, because you're getting the data back, you're getting insights back on how people are doing and where they're dropping off, and now we can start to nudge them, and we can drop that data into the M&E process so that we can do the assessments that you were talking about. But we do forget. It's the same as the math literacy problem, isn't it? You know, we've got, it's like, who's going to solve the 0 to 1 problem? We can, once you're at 1, I can take you on a digital journey. But, you know, we expect somebody else to do that. I'll just tell you very quickly this, that we are working with a big hospital group who's going through a big digital transformation process. And they did this, you know, they benchmarked 30,000 nurses. And it's exactly what you described. The older, more experienced, the ones with a lot of the institutional knowledge can answer the phone, you know, and the younger ones tend to be able to be, you know, fully digital native. So you can spend as much money as you like on digital transformation, but you haven't put the customer, the actual user at the center of that experience. And, you know, you know, swipe and click and close and save and all these things that come naturally to us. We will look at this and I'm like, the green button or the red one, you know. So it's a wicked problem. But just my question on that is back to this point about, okay, so what do individual companies do? Because, you know, how does a company solve this? And how do you build the business model? I mean, I know this talks also to why a CISA exists and why other people are sort of trying to come together to solve this problem in a more organized way. But as you say, it's got attention because it's also the, you know, people see it as their IP.
Yeah, I'll tell you the observation I've been making for quite a while now. Because companies now have accepted that we're dealing with a community that is not digitally savvy, and at the same time, they want to become more efficient. They want to find a way to service the customer digitally, and they realize, look, even if you were to go and develop your own app, the chances are, you know, given POPI and all other things, you want to make sure that the information of the customer is protected, but also that the customer is able to do that, load their information, register, and so on. So what I'm now observing is that companies are accepting that we need to simplify these digital platforms to enable customers to interact. And they found that actually WhatsApp is the most simplest form of a digital platform that people are so accustomed to, because they can chat to their friends in their own language. Let me underline that. They can chat to their friends in their own language on a WhatsApp, and they can send each other pictures, they can do a video call, they can even call someone overseas. For me, WhatsApp has been a game changer for many businesses. Now you are now starting to see businesses pivoting or gravitating towards using WhatsApp as a means to service the customer, where they create a chatbot, they create a chat platform, or rather a WhatsApp platform where you can choose on the menu how you want to be serviced, and to state what level of service you want. So in doing so, they are also embedding AI into the platform, using AI. So again, maybe that's the first point maybe to look at currently, because that is the best thing that we have currently. Maybe that's the first point of call, where we need to be directing this digital literacy on the platform, but also work around the platform. If you want to come up with your own that is simpler than that, but I think for me currently WhatsApp will be at the right benchmark, because we're seeing that companies are using that for servicing. Now, but let's look at what is missing with some of the digital platforms that we have. Maybe what is missing there is the warmth of being able to converse in vernacular, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it can become a barrier. But of course, like here, we're talking to only a segment of our population, but it most probably is the biggest one, the one that is not digitally savvy anyway. So because if you look at it, and for me, it's like a pyramid shape. Those who are at the top of the pyramid, they can use any platform, they can engage, they can do a lot of style, they can freestyle with a lot of things. But those who are at the bottom of the pyramid, who are not digitally savvy, those are the ones that are struggling. That is your WhatsApp community there. So now it means, even if you want to introduce certain things, introduce them using a platform that they're comfortable, because you know that WhatsApp is one. The other one platform which I see even the network providers are using, because it's simpler, is your USSD. They know that people can buy airtime using USSD, it's cheaper. So again, how do we find efficient ways, simplified ways or means of connecting with a consumer, but also at the same time accommodating their preference to engage using vernacular, which could easily be a barrier in many ways. Those are just few observations I've made.
I love all of that, and I think this is the big disruptive benefit that AI can bring to give. It'll give us a big unfair advantage, because these underserved languages, we can now start to do that in a way that's very cost effective. I do worry that right now, you're right, that people are using it, companies are using it as a utility. Okay, so here's your statements, here's your stuff. But you and I both know that to make financial education truly successful, it's got to be story driven. It's got to be this world. It's got to be a game or gamified in some form, because everyone's on their hero's journey, as you say, whether it's somebody sitting at the boardroom, or somebody struggling to make ends meet in a township somewhere. It's that ability to put customized stories together for those people is the thing that excites me, because once you realize you've got agency in your story, I would say you and I, our work is done. I'm not just a passive recipient here. I've actually realized that the decisions I make will influence my financial future. And we're as excited by those low cost, low barrier to entry things.
Yeah. So, but then the question for me would be, why not use this simpler platform as a gateway to the more sophisticated platforms? You know what I mean?
Love it.
But because they wouldn't just go to, if I may use Play Store as an example, they won't just go to Play Store to download something they're not familiar with. But you can give them small bites, small chunks of content on WhatsApp, conceptualize, sensitize them, socialize them. And when they are ready, then you can give them a link and then move them out of there to another platform. But you have to engage them at the platform that they're comfortable with in order to take them into a platform that's, so I think for me, it's about finding those opportunities using these simpler, low-cost platforms to socialize them, to get them to the more sophisticated stuff.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so let's open. Are there any other questions? Does anybody else want to comment? I'm just checking the chat as well. Let me see. I saw Amanda, you did ask that question, and thank you for jumping that. Has anybody got anything else that they'd like to ask him, John, or to add into the mix? See, somebody's got a hand up, I think. Bella, did I miss something?
No, I just wanted to ask from the chat and for everyone here, can you speak a little bit more about the new FSCA regulations and what the changes mean to organizations in the fin services space? Because I think you did it briefly, but I think it's such an important topic right now for people to understand.
Yeah, good catch. Thanks, Bella. Exactly.
Thanks for that, Bella. So for the longest time, financial institutions started introducing financial literacy program, and then and these were funded through their net profit after tax, because and the motivation for most companies was to use that investment as part of the social investment to benefit from the triple BE status. As some may be aware that when we are talking about the triple BE level, for you to achieve a particular level, there must be certain things that you've achieved in terms of all the different pillars of the triple BE. So if you look at the scorecard, amongst other things, there's a pillar there of consumer financial education, which requires institutions to spend 0.4% of their net profit after tax. But even then, there are guidance notes which were gazetted by the minister, which will stipulate what sort of target audience that you need to reach, how much spend should go towards rural area, which is about 25%. What rate should you be targeting? Because it's, in the context of it being a triple BE scorecard, and in that context, they would then say that, then they would talk about branding, that branding should be limited to 10%, and so on and so forth. But having said that, companies were using that, and they would actually get their maximum triple BE points. Now the regulator, the FSCA, came back and said, but hang on a sec, whilst we don't have a problem with you doing your consumer financial education to achieve your triple BE points, but as the regulator, we want to introduce conduct standards. Yes, I believe they borrowed a lot from the framework that was already existing in the guidance note that was gazetted by the minister in respect of how to go about achieving your triple BE status on the different pillars there. Now what the FSCA is saying, look, from March next year, these conduct standards will come into effect, and there are 6 pillars which were highlighted or noted in this guidance note. Without going to the level of detail on every single one of them, but I do want to highlight that the ones that I think stick out the most for me, number one, is the fact that there should be no marketing of products in consumer financial education. Financial education should be financial education, marketing should be marketing, that you should not conflate the two. I think we saw a proliferation of financial education across the market, where it was sounding more like marketing, but disguised as financial education. I think they were very uncomfortable with that. And I'm sure the FSCA would have looked at other trends elsewhere in the world. And in some of the engagements or platforms I've been where the regulator was there, they've maintained the view that the industry is purporting to be doing financial education, yet they are pushing marketing. So that's the one. The other issue is around, the limited branding should be there. And so in other words, the branding of these financial education initiative should not overwhelm the content, because that's where the temptation to market comes in. But then they also mentioned this monitoring and evaluation piece, that we need to be able to do monitoring and evaluation, amongst other things. So I'm of the view that any financial institution that is offering consumer financial education should actually conduct its own gap analysis, see how far it is from complying with those conduct standards, which have already been published, by the way, which this year, and in March, I think, and then they will become effective in March next year. So I would say, companies should actually do their own gap analysis, start addressing the gaps or the shortfalls to make sure when March comes in, they're not found wanting. If they are unable to do that, of course, they need to go and find somebody else to assist them, or possibly even making their contribution with the likes of Assisa Foundation, which helps financial institutions that says, look, we don't have the manpower to execute this internally because we can't do it in-house. Can you assist us? And then they still get the maximum benefits. So in a nutshell, that's what's happening in the industry. So you're going to see more and more the clamping down of marketing in the financial education initiative, so that it's not cluttered with product conversation, marketing, and brand initiatives.
Yeah, and thank you. And I'm not sure that everybody is aware of what sounds like quite a big shift that's coming in this landscape. I mean, we're talking about a significant amount of money here, if just across all the banks and insurance companies. And I hope everyone is aware of what is a fairly big shift. So, to play that back, it needs to be based on science. It needs to be human-centered, I've heard you say. It needs to have a solid basis through which we can assess it. It can be marketing. I mean, there's no downside to creating trust in your brand by making better customers. That's no problem. But I'm going to say, calm down. Don't try and sell too soon, because you do tend to erode the trust. On the true financial education side, you need all the things I've just said, which is pick your lane, pick the area where you believe you have a competitive advantage or knowledge to share. Do something that's authentic to your brand, because that goes back to, why should I hear about this from you? Oh, okay, of course, I expect to hear from your brand. And so in a way, as fragmented as this is, it also seems to be pretty common sense, a lot of this. And we just need to go back to those first principles. So maybe just in closing, we've got some people here who want to listen to this, to say, what one thing should they do? These are all people in similar roles to yours, or interested in financial education in a corporate context. Is there one thing they should do tomorrow that you could, I know I'm not expecting you to have a magic wand, but.
Look, I think one of the reasons a lot of financial educations around the world have failed to show impact is because, one, they are poorly designed. Number two, there was no needs analysis of the target audiences that are being targeted by the relevant institutions. And there was a lot of approach of one size fits all. So you're assuming that you can use the same content to speak to young people at tertiary or at high school, that same content for working adults, same content for people approaching retirement. It doesn't work like that. So a one size fits all does not work. You have to customize. You have to make sure there are nuances. Others prefer face-to-face. Others would prefer to engage online, because people are different. Even today, if you ask, if you go into an Uber, do you prefer a driver that speaks to you or the one that keeps quiet? Others will tell you, hey, I get annoyed when I find the driver speaks too much. I just want to be quiet and just reflect. And others say, no, I don't want to be lonely. I want to engage. So people are different. So don't don't force everyone to go into a face-to-face engagement. Don't force everyone to go into a digital. Understand what the preference of a consumer is, and then provide them with something that speaks to that. And I want to see if I can, in my answer, I can include a response to a question by Tlale Matseke, who says, totally agree with the point about language in connecting consumers. Considering how Swahili, for example, has evolved as a language to integrate digital and tech terms, and the high digital literacy in Kenya across all ages, including the elderly. I'm curious about the extent to which digital literacy is limited by the cultural development of our languages and what this means for financial inclusion. Excellent, excellent. Well, look, that question on its own can be a paper for a PhD. I promise you that. Love it, love it. And it talks to some of the stuff we spoke about earlier, Glenn, that language can be a barrier. We need to look at that and also consider the cultural nuances because we socialize different when it comes to money. Some of us, we couldn't talk about money with our parents, yeah.
And I love that question. And I think that's a topic for another a whole conversation about that relationship between me, my value system, my language, my culture. John, I know we're out of time. I just wanted to say thank you. It is always so fascinating. You are literally sharing years and years of wisdom condensed down into what you put out there today. And I mean, these are things you've battle tested, you've learned, you've made mistakes, and your willingness to always share it. So I just wanted to say thank you. I found it fascinating. I always do chatting to you. I'm very grateful. And I will close with just this remark, which is, it's a secret. It's John's 30th birthday tomorrow. So I hope you all wish him well again. But John, thanks, mate. Always wonderful chatting to you. So thank you for making time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks to everyone for listening in. And yeah, we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.